quite a few joining us from around the place. Okay, 12:31. So we'll kick off and we'll get this started. So welcome everyone to why focusing on your productivity can put your webinar on why focusing on productivity can put your business at risk. Those of you who joined earlier might have heard Jonathan and I chatting about this, and it was interesting that we've had a few new attendees to the webinars. We've been running these now for 10 or 11 weeks, and we get sort of new people joining from time to time, and there's also a consistent group that are obviously enjoying what we're doing. But there's a few additional people that we haven't seen before, and we were just musing that maybe the topic, I think a lot of our webinars at the start were about COVID and moving into home officing and being, and this is a slightly different theme and an interesting one as well. And something we see a lot of is that this sort of focus on productivity and how it's not always a good thing, and so that's what we're going to talk about today, is to when you should focus on productivity and when it becomes potentially puts your business at risk. For those of you who don't know me, and there's a number of names on here that I'm not familiar with, so I'm Greg Bull, I'm one of the project directors at Coxon Alliance. I'm lucky enough to be joined today by Jonathan Clegg, one of the co-founders of Coxon Alliance, and a man of great knowledge and wisdom, and he'll be sharing some of that with us today. So hello, welcome, Jonathan.
Hi, good afternoon.
Also today, we've got a number of our team on the line, and I think, and so if you have any questions or comments or like to comment on what I'm saying, feel free to enter those into the chat box. Our team are monitoring that. We'd like this best as much. We'd like this to be a conversation, not just us talking at you over the video. So please feel free to join in. As part of that conversation, we'll have a very quick survey just to get some insights into who's on the line and what we're hoping to get out of this. We'll be providing some information today on productivity, and then and from that we'll hopefully gauge what future support we might need, and also it might help us inform us as to what you're interested in for any future webinars or for future webinars that we do. So today's agenda. First, I'm going to talk about, I guess, the key headline of this webinar, which is I guess the pitfalls of making productivity a singular focus, and then we'll talk a bit about some better ways to improve your performance, and then how you might then apply that to your business. But to kick us off, now I'm going to put a survey up on the panel, and it's going to ask these three questions. What I'd like from you is to which one of these statements sort of kind of reflects most closely your sort of view on productivity. It might be we really focus on being more productive. However, it's a real challenge with constantly varying daily demands and priorities, which can impact our productivity significantly. Or it could be that there's a real drive to be more efficient, to reduce costs. The only way you can do this and meet your customer needs is to become more productive. So your drive is about efficiency and reducing costs. Or the alternative could be that you have a real customer focus, and being more productive is a way that you can actually do more for your customers than you currently are with your current resources. So I'll just pop that survey up on the screen. So those of you who haven't been part of this before, please make a selection on here. I'll give you a minute or so to do that, to read those through, just to get a sense of what our focus is and what our minds is. This will help as we go through the webinar today to sort of emphasize particular content that is appealing most to our audience. So I got a few responses. Please enter something. We're not going to let people know what your focus is. It's just going to be a percentage and number on there. So we've got about halfway through. I know if you're feeling a bit shy, please, that's good. Please put that 14 out of 21. Excellent. Okay, can we get a full score on here? So 14 out of 21. There's an interesting trend coming through. Anyone hasn't put your response in? Okay, I'll now share that with the group and see what we've got. So we have a small number. The focus is being on more productive. However, there's a challenge being with the daily demands and priorities. There's a drive being more efficient, reduce costs. So almost exactly a third of our audience is suggesting that reducing costs and being more efficient is to do that and meeting the customer's needs. And then a similarly high number about it's much more of a customer focus, be more productive so you can do more for the people and the resources that you have. So some of us are looking to be more efficient by reducing costs. Others are actually trying to do more for our customers. And some, I guess, would like to be more productive, but are challenged by that. So hopefully today's webinar will help with that and give you some clues as to how you can sort of meet some of those goals and objectives that you're trying to achieve. So let's kick off and talk about what is productivity. And I guess in its purest form, productivity is simply a measure of outputs per unit of input. And so what does that mean? Well, in business, it's a measure of how efficiently, how the efficiency of how a company, of your end-to-end production process. So how well you do what you're doing for your customers. It's a lagging indicator. So it tells you how well you've used your resources. And that's one of the reasons why we believe that having a singular focus on productivity may actually be not the best focus for you in actually becoming more productive. So focusing on productivity may actually be making your organisation less productive. And why is that? Well, I believe, or we believe, that focusing on productivity with a sort of single mindset is illogical. Why? Well, as I said before, it's a lagging indicator. It tells you how well you used your resources. But I think a really important thing to think about is it's often measured at the wrong part of the process. We see there's a lot of emphasis on measuring intra-process productivity or measuring employee activity in terms of productivity. And this can lead to really counterproductive behaviour. And a little later on, we'll talk about that in more detail. We'll get some really good examples, and that's part of the reason why Jonathan's here, because we are lucky enough to work with many organisations, working with your frontline and trying to help you become more productive. And we see a lot of this stuff going on, and that's why I chose the quote on the left from Eli Goldratt, because it really does make sense. And I see this not just in the workplace, but with kids, with children, with people at any levels of life, is tell me how you'll measure me and I'll tell you how I'll behave. If you measure me in a logical way, don't complain about the logical behaviour. And if you think about, reflect on some of your experiences that you've had over the years, either in work or in teams or whatever, you'll start to understand how true that quote actually is in many instances. I think in a lot of instances, productivity is misunderstood, and therefore it's incorrectly used as a measure. And I think in its crudest form, it's how many widgets did I do in an hour? So people say, well, it's like I'll do a screen of work. I'll get this many calls done. I'll do this, and that's how I'm getting a pat on the back and rewarded for doing that. So my main focus is productivity, is that numerical number per hour. What that does, however, is if there are other things happening in your business that units per hour doesn't necessarily capture, then it starts to hide what's happening and gives you a really false understanding of how productive you are. So if there's complaints, if there's rework, if there's refunds, if there's all these other things going on and they're not captured, you're only looking at how you might be really, really good at handling complaints, really, really good at handling refunds, and really, really good at fixing problems. And you might be really productive at doing that. But should that have happened in the first place? And so because we're measuring productivity as a units per hour, when we're not doing things right, and it's actually making us less productive, we're missing a lot of things. And so I think it's time to think about how can we do this better? How can we become more productive without actually making productivity that singular focus that a lot of organisations, I know that I've worked in, and probably Jonathan and many of those online have experienced as well. So Jonathan, this is where I'd like you to chat about some of the instances where you might have seen some of these behavioural mismatches with productivity.
So as Greg was talking to you about this focus on units per hour, it made me think of a case in the insurance sector, where whenever people needed to catch up to meet their output target, they would shortcut. So they would know certain parts of the process that they could dodge, probably in the quality space, so not going to do the quality checks, and just go around them so that they could catch up. It would allow them to create, if you like, some extra time in their day. The ones on screen, we definitely have encountered times where both calls are either handled and cut off very early or at a particular time, or they're lengthened. When call handlers or operators are given a target, a call AHT target, they will most definitely try and meet it. But to do that, they will very skillfully find ways to either cut off a call or to extend it. So if you've ever been on a contact center call where somebody said, well, have I served your need? And before you've said yes, I've almost cut you off, it's because they know that the internal monitor is about to ping them. So they'll cut off. In terms of mining, which is a sector we spend a lot of time in, we encountered a situation where the executive had wanted to sweat the assets, make them work hard. So they were monitoring the number of operating hours per day per truck. So what did the dispatchers do? Make sure that the trucks traveled the longest routes to increase the hours, to make sure nobody saw the fact that the trucks were not utilized. In fact, we worked out that the trucks had gone around the world twice unloaded, and that was just merely to make sure that nobody noticed that they were not being sweated. In manufacturing, a common example is what people will do is switch the plan, work to something that is easy, possibly higher volume, so that they can meet their shift target. We worked for an organisation in the food sector, and this was a common practice, so that the shift target was always met, very often not the monthly target, because as long as the shift target was met, and that was usually by switching out certain difficult products in the plan, they would meet their target and everybody would be pleased, because it was just a tons per shift target. Once it became attainment to the plan, it became different. I think that what you'll find is, if there are a lot of greens, in other words, we meet the productivity target and you see them as all green, you should scratch the surface and see what's underneath, because typically what people have done is they've figured out how to make the system work for them. If you like, you could call that gaming. I tend to think it's the fact that they've been given a number or target or a measure and they're achieving it. And so can't blame them for that, really. I think you have to look to management and saying, what are you trying to achieve? So these are all examples. I think my watchword is, over all the years I've done this, if you find all green attainment, everything's on track and your productivity numbers are hitting the mark, then there's probably more to it, and you're missing what's really going on inside the process. Greg?
Yeah, I agree. I can think of examples also in insurance where we all want to get in claims, we want to get our claim resolved, and the metrics often is measured as to how many work items a day get done, and there's another KPI is that a customer needs to be contacted every 10 days or 9 days, and someone needs to send a letter or talk to them or whatever. And so what happens is your claim actually doesn't gain any traction. People are getting yep, I'm doing 15 items a day and I've contacted my 5 customers today, but I haven't actually progressed the claim and got it closer to being resolved and getting an outcome for the customer. And so, yes, I'm green on all those metrics, but the time that claims are taking isn't improving at all either. And so that's another instance that I can think of where those metrics are being met, but the customer's need isn't being met. And so they're things to look out for. So if we're not going to focus on productivity, what do we have to focus on? And it's about managing the levers that actually drive performance. If we're performing well, then productivity will come, and then we'll know how well we're performing. So only measure productivity where it counts, and that's really at the conclusion of the process, when everything's been done, when the customer needs is met. I spoke before about things like refunds and returns and rework and complaints and those things. They are all part of meeting the customer's need, but more often than not, they're not captured in a lot of productivity metrics. And we're seeing that we're very productive at the front line, but there's a lot of other work taking place because we haven't met quality or service needs, and therefore we are actually much less productive than we think. So the first question should always be, now, have we met our customers' needs, and then did we do it as efficiently as possible? And then let's look at that and say, well, how? And then let's look at our productivity and think about how productive we actually are. So if you think of this chart here is really meant to show that there's 2 real outcomes. There's productivity, which is how efficiently you use your resources to meet your customers' needs, and there's customer experience, and they're measurements that you have. but it's what you do down the middle at the front line. It's what your people are doing and how you organise and manage your people and what they do and how they do the work, the materials, how effectively you use your plant and equipment, what overheads you have in place, and then how do you meet quality expectations? Are you over or under delivering on quality? How well do you meet service? And are you delivering the right amount? Is it taking the right amount of effort? So managing the bits and pieces in the middle is what meets your customer's need. Only then can you really measure customer experience and productivity and say, yes, we're getting good scores on customer experience, but it's costing us a lot to do that. Okay, how do we become more productive? Or we're really, really productive, but our customers aren't that happy. So how do we improve that aspect? And so how you improve those aspects really comes down to how you manage the work at the front line and making it better. Now, there are many metrics, and depending on the business that you're in and the customers that you're serving and the work that's in place, any of these things, and this isn't an exhaustive list, could be metrics that you might use either as a leading indicator or a lag indicator of performance. And these together, and how will you do these, will determine how productive you are. So I guess the point of this slide is to think about your customers and what you're doing for them. And what particular quality, service, and effort and cost metrics are you using at the front line, and not being units per hour or another form of productivity? And how well are we meeting our customers' needs? And so, okay, for our business, what indicators tell us that we're doing a good job for our customers? Then it becomes a matter of using those measures and having, I guess, what we'd like to think is correctly set and well-managed work standards. And to do that comes down to really having a really close look at your process and understanding, well, how work should be performed. And then we need to develop standards to represent when all goes to plan in the end-to-end process. The reason I say when all goes to plan is because often we work with organisations where we factor in the variation as part of what good looks like. So, which we don't always know when variance is going to occur, and it could be variance to the positive or variance to the negative. And so, to build in potential fat or inefficiencies into your standards doesn't make sense. You need to understand what good looks like in doing that. Jonathan?
I have an example that has always stood out for me. Some time ago, we were working again in the resources sector at the tail end of the process, which is a processing plant. And when we started, the client organisation said to us, we are not producing enough through our plant, and we don't understand why. As the team started to investigate this, what we learned was that when the plant was built, the first thing that the engineering team did upon commissioning was they took 85% of the nameplate capacity. So they took 85% of what they think the machine could run at. When then it went from commissioning to operating and the operating teams took it over, what they managed to convince management of was that the 85% of nameplate was too high and that we should take 80% of the 85%. So we're now running at about 60% of what the machine was built for. In today's world, you really can't afford to do that because you've built a machine that really needs to operate at its nameplate capacity. So the first thing we started to do was get the organisation to experiment and work up operational standards that could meet both the quality and the performance criteria, because that enabled us to make sure that we could get about 20% back. That 20% was what we needed to make the cost hurdles work. But it was interesting how the organisation had worked this back into something that they felt they could cope with, something that wouldn't stress maintenance, that wouldn't stress the operators, but from a shareholder or value perspective, was way off the mark. So I think, to Greg's point, critically understanding the process and the operating standards is often a real clue as to determining how productive you could be.
And I use the word standards, not from a Tayloristic perspective where you standardize everything down to a millisecond and everything has to be done at that. It's about understanding when it all goes to plan, this is what it should look like in terms of not just how many we do, but what's the quality, what's the service, and how do we do that. But understand that there's always going to be variation, and we need to manage the variation as and when it occurs, not build it into our processes, because then what happens is you do become less productive, you do become less efficient, and ultimately you become less competitive, and you end up not meeting your customer's need because your cost of production is too high, and they will go somewhere else.
And this is that point I'm making about if everything is a green light, if everything is 100% attainment to plan, something suspicious is going on. Have another look, have a scratch underneath the surface, because you're going to find that if you don't have variance, you've actually got an inefficient process. Variance is interesting. Variance should tell you that the process has got some elastic in it, and that you potentially can make some improvements. So if you're not seeing variance as a manager, you should definitely look under the hood and and scratch around a bit.
Yeah. So I like to, when I'm working with people, say is let's work out, when all goes to plan, what it should look like. Let's plan to meet that, and we'll manage the variation when it occurs. And that way we can be more proactive to do that. Now, that's easier said than done, because then you need to introduce some mechanisms into your management system to say, okay, how do I pick up a variation at a time when I can act on it and actually make use of that to help get the outcome for my customer. And so we'd work a lot about and talking to people about creating leading indicators. And for me, your leading indicators are really your eyes at the front line. You can't sit and watch everything every moment of the day, but you can have some measures and metrics that tell you how things are going. And if they're the right measures and you're measuring the right things in terms of, once again, it's the combination, and we'll talk a little about how things interrelate in a moment, but the combination of quality, service, and cost or effort. And if you get those indicators right to the sweet spot that works for your business, then those leading indicators can let you know when things are going off track, and then gives you the ability, or your frontline managers the ability to do something. We know what our standards are. We know if everything goes to plan, these indicators should look like this. When they start to move away from those standards, then that's an indicator that, okay, we need to act now, so that in a day's time, the end of the shift or weeks or whatever the time period is that we know we haven't had too much slippage in the wrong direction. Or similarly, if you get ahead of plan, I often get is people, we get, say for instance, there's a lot more simple work today than we expected, and people say, well, I only have to do 25 things today. Well, because it's all the simple stuff and your work standards factor in hard and simple, you actually probably might need to do 30 today, because tomorrow you'll get all the hard stuff, and so you'll actually get less done. So if you don't make hay whilst it's there, you actually become less productive, because there will be days when you get all the complex stuff in, because, as I said, the variation is often random. So you need to be able to take advantage of that. So those indicators let you know, okay, we're doing well today. What else can we bring forward to take advantage of that? Because tomorrow might be a completely different day where we don't do as well, because complexity has meant that things take longer. So the message here is to think about, if I was watching work, if I had a real-time view of what was going on, what would tell me that I needed to act and react? And that'll give you a clue as to those leading indicators and what they should be. And they're not productivity metrics. These are things about meeting the customer's needs. These are quality, service, and effort metrics that tell you. It's the combination of those things. It's not simply how many widgets do we do per hour. So think about how your metrics interrelate and how they might influence performance, and who's accountable for that. And once again, it's great having a leading indicator. It's great having non-productivity metrics. But if you're overemphasizing an individual metric, then you'll get exactly the same behaviors you'll get when, if you make productivity the focus. It will drive people's behavior in terms of, it might be number of calls, it might be conversion rates. People will find ways to increase those things at the expense of something else, because I'm being rewarded for conversion rates. Therefore, I'll only call these customers because I know they'll be the easy sale. I get a high conversion rate. Yet I'm not calling enough customers to generate enough revenue for the job that I've been paid for, but I get remunerated on my conversion rate. So once again, that's influenced and changed my behavior. So it's about creating a combination of indicators and not just focusing on single metric drivers. Similarly, at the organisational level, Frontline is about meeting customers' expectations and doing that efficiently. As you go up the tree, those accountabilities change. So, and typically, as you get further away from the coalface, the productivity question becomes greater, And as you get closer to the coalface, the performance piece comes more to the fore, and somewhere in the middle, you're probably juggling a bit of both. But it's about understanding whose metrics drive what, and then how, as a manager, you can then influence and help your team improve what they're doing. The key thing in all this is defining what good looks like, and it's back to having work standards and measures and metrics in place that determine how well you're doing. And you have to be accountable to that. So if good looks like this in terms of quality, efficiency, and service, then this is what we need to do, and we need to be able to respond quickly enough. That's where those leading indicators come in, to make sure that we stay on track. So those metrics will interrelate, and you'll find that you can over-service, you can over-service and provide too much quality, so your costs go up. You can cut back on costs, but you get a reduction in quality and service. So you need to understand how they interrelate to get the right outcome for the business and for your customers. Productivity will come at the end when you calculate that and know how well we delivered on that. So I think that the real message here is that, as we said, productivity is a lag indicator, and really, from my perspective or our perspective, is it owned at the senior manager level. Senior management should be looking at it and saying, our budgets, our plans, our projections, our forecasts are expecting this sort of outcome. This is what our total cost of production is. This is what we'd like it to be. That will then should drive a root cause analysis and continuous improvement conversation. So if we think back to the chart I showed before, which had productivity on one side and customer experience on the other, is are we meeting our customers' expectations? Are we growing our customer base? Are we getting good net promoter scores or whatever you measure customer experience compared with how efficiently you are delivering that? And at a senior management level, it's okay, that's in balance. How do we get better? And driving those continuous improvement conversations. Or, yes, we're meeting customer expectations, we're blowing it out of the park, but pricing is such, or our cost is such, that we're doing it very efficiently. Where and how can we improve at the front line, at the performance? That then sets the operating mix, if you like, for your front line. So from that you determine, okay, this is what we want to deliver and how to deliver. These are desired outcomes. It is now the responsibility of the front line to meet the customer's needs and do that efficiently as possible. Now, the front line, if you're a frontline manager or you're quite close to the front line, what's important is that you empower your frontline managers to be able to be proactive. And so and productivity is really about the right work being done by the right person at the right time to the right standard. And if you get those things right, then your productivity calculation at the end of the production process will give you a really good indication of how well you're doing that. But as we said before, if our metrics have got out of whack and we might be doing the right amount of work, but we're not doing it, or we might be doing the right work, but because we're cherry picking work and we're not doing stuff when it's due, we might be not doing it at the right time, or not the most skilled people might not be doing the particular piece of work, and so therefore our quality might drop. So it's important to enable your staff and have systems in place that enable your managers to get that work to be done as and when it should be to meet your customers' needs according to your customer promise of quality and service. So once again, what does that look like? You have a disciplined management process where your frontline managers have a way of understanding what work should be done. And we do that with robust standards. And we have a system in place that enables us to, get that right work to people at the right time. But that's just the foundation. I think the big part then is management capabilities, is how, if we have the system and standards in place, how effectively are we using them? We often see that you might have work standards, and a lot of organisations have work standards, but they're not used the right way. We spoke before about managing variance and planning to meet the standard. Often you'll find that the standard becomes 10 widgets per day, or one screen of work, or trucks. We spoke about how many kilometres per hour the trucks are doing. That becomes the standard, and so it drives wrong behaviour. So managers need to know how to use that information to best set the expectations for their team. To do that, we need, it's really having those leading indicators available to real-time tools. And so that's often the challenge is how do you get just the right amount of data available at the right interval to enable us to take action. And there are many systems in place, particularly in financial services, where we track work and work volumes that are done by people. But often that is once again, they're often productivity metrics, they're lagging indicators. So from a manager's perspective, you need to say what work is coming down the pipe. So from a classic, what's the customer demanding? The customer has this amount of work is in my backlog. What needs to be done and when does it need to be done? And as a manager, I need to be making sure that I have something in place that gets that work to people so that they're doing the work that the customer is expecting to be done to the standard the customer expected, we promised the customer to take place. And so that is what creates that proactive management of the workload. It's not responding, oh, we did a good job yesterday, well done. It's we're doing a good job today, keep it up. Or actually things have slipped back, let's reprioritize work, or let's get more resources in to get ourselves back on track, because what happened today wasn't what we expected. It's those leading indicators that will drive your productivity piece, not counting necessarily how many items per hour we were doing. It's doing the right work and making sure that right work gets done. So we've spoken a lot about productivity, and I guess the productivity traps. And so I think that the key thing is that if you have the key message is if you're measuring productivity at the front line, then I think that you're in a productivity trap, because it's driving the wrong behaviours. It might not necessarily be capturing all it has to ensure that we're as productive as possible. If your productivity metrics are simply about units per hour, then you're definitely missing things. If you're not factoring in all the other stuff that takes place, just simply how many transactions per hour, it needs to be which transactions were they to SLA, were they what we're expecting to do, etc., etc. So once again, if you're just doing units per hour and you don't have any other way of measuring performance, then I'd say there's a good chance that you're in a productivity trap as well. Jonathan spoke before about if your metrics are always green. I think to know you're managing an organisation well, there needs to be tension in the system. I like to call it. There needs to be, your KPIs need to be hard to achieve. They need to say, well, everything needs to go to plan, or we needed to have done something to ensure we get to green. Not impossible to achieve, but they need to be stretching enough to know that if something doesn't quite go right, we know about it. And more often than not, we see productivity metrics that are green, yet when we look at the numbers of complaints, the number of rework, the number of returns, or whatever else it is those numbers are higher than they should be. So, okay, how can we be productive at the same time our customer metrics aren't what they should be? There's a mismatch there. So it suggests to me that if everything's green, there's something's not quite right. I see this a lot is if we talk about productivity is you get this horse trading around what should be included and excluded from the metric to make it fair, particularly when it comes to productivity. Oh, we can't include that because that's out of our control. We can't include this. So if you find that you're once again debating with people what should or should not be in a metric because it's not fair, or it's to do with productivity, then you're measuring productivity at a too low a level, because there's stuff that's happening that's making you unproductive or inefficient that's being left out. And so it's giving this kind of veneer of success. We're productive at this level, but we're excluding a whole bunch of stuff that makes us unproductive. But where's that being captured and counted? Now, the people dealing with complaints might be doing it really, really well, and they're productive, but the fact we have complaints means we're not. Jonathan, we've got some tips.
So an example, and again, it's from my resources experience. The large mining companies probably 20 years ago realized that exactly what Greg's describing is that there were all sorts of things taken out before they calculated productivity. And so across the different large blue chip miners, Rio Tinto, Anglo American, BHP, etc., they all built what they called the time usage model. And that was because the finance cost is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So they started measuring everything based on a 24-hour, 7-day week cycle, and nothing was excluded. And that finally gave them some sort of level playing field. And I think, again, you've got to look at your own business and say, how do I make sure that I know what we're measuring? And this aspect of fairness, no matter what, you have to say, well, unless I measure everything and I measure it in a way that doesn't allow for exclusions, I will always have some level of the wool pulled over my eyes.
Yes, and that's why I think productivity is it's a headline, a top line metric, because it should give you an idea of your entire production process and how productive you are. There are better measures and metrics. If your front line or up a couple of levels from the front line are debating what should be in or out, then there should be they should be measured on other metrics that aren't. The productivity isn't necessarily the best measure for that part of the business, or if it is, it needs to include everything so they can give some clues as to, okay, what do we need to fix? What isn't working to make us more productive? Because if you exclude things, then it eliminates that continuous improvement activity. And the point of having the productivity metric is to say, well, the more productive we are, ultimately, the more productive we are, the more profitable we'll be, and the more competitive we should be. And so, but it has to include everything, because otherwise, it's like when you're playing golf, you don't include the air shot, or those sorts of things. You're missing stuff that does actually add to your score. So in summary, avoiding the productivity trap is avoid having a productivity only focus, make it a singular thing. Productivity is really an outcome. It's a measure of how well you used your resources over a given period of time, and that's what it should be used for. Focus on the levers that actually drive performance. So have a really close look at your business and say, what are the things that drive quality, service, efficiency, and customer experience, and put those in the hands of people to enable them to meet those expectations for the customer. With that, be really clear on what good looks like for the customer, and in terms of quality and service and cost is we need to be able to deliver this to our customers at this cost, and that is our goal to achieve that. Your role at the front line and as the next levels above is to set the business up for success, to meet those customer needs as efficiently as possible. And these are what we're going to measure. These are the levers that we're going to measure you by. And it's the combination of those standards that make the thing. It's not one or the other. It's how you use them together. Those lead indicators have to be leading indicators. You have to be able to respond. I think in today's day and age, the customer's expectations are such that if things are going off track, you need to be able to fix it as quickly as possible. So either the customer doesn't notice, or if they do notice, they're delighted by how well you responded, as opposed to kicking the can down the line. Those things being looked at in a responsive sense down the track. It needs to be happening now. So those indicators need to be as close to real time as you can get them. And there are many ways of doing that. And I think you probably look at your systems and go, well, we don't have that at the moment. And chances are that there's a solution out there. And if you are looking at getting better leading indicators or better ways of managing your team, then feel free to reach out and contact with us. We're fortunate enough to work with many organisations that have those types of solutions in place that may be applicable to yours, or something similar that you could use. Remember, the front line drives performance and senior management drives productivity. So if you're a senior manager, your role is to ask for the root cause analysis, is to demand the explanations, it's to seek out solutions to help your front line more efficiently drive performance. You need to set your front line up to be able to have those tools in place, give them the management capability to say, you're empowered to drive performance, and I'm going to do everything I can, or we're going to do everything we can to make that a success for you. And so that's where that, being a productivity really is it's a top line lagging metric. Use it to drive those continuous improvement conversations. I think it's human nature, I think, is, if we tell all staff to be more productive at the front line, then we'll be more productive at the top line. And I think we've shown enough examples today, with Jonathan's help, to say that if you force people to be productive singularly at the front line, it does actually, yes, they might be very productive, but in a very unproductive way for your overall mission and for your business. And so Keep it the top line and make them accountable for the performance and service delivery for your customers. That's my concluding statement. We've got a few minutes left for some chat. I see that the chat line has been active. Jonathan, have you picked up anything on the conversation there that we could share with our attendees?
I think Connie's comment down there about design a process that's efficient, that delivers on outcome. I think there's a clear message that says, you know, if you're going to continually disappoint your customers by focusing only on productivity, sooner or later you won't have customers. So I think if you looked at the metrics that meet customer demand and make sure that those are working, so your rework, your handle times, so that you know that you're delivering on your organization's imperative first. So understand the customer's journey, understand the customer's pain, walk in their shoes, enable your frontline to deliver on your organization's mission, and then start to work out, did we do that efficiently and effectively? And that's the are we productive question. But I'm always struck as to how many organizations are able to perform rework, do problem solving after complaints, but can't get it right the first time. And if we put more time into that at the front line, then some of those productivity related issues of why we're so inefficient will go away.
Yeah, so I've been having a conversation with there's a number of some great sort of business systems and reporting tools out there that give you a really great rear view look of how things went, and you can do some great analysis to understand, you know, what went wrong. When, you know, maybe we don't need a better black box recorder. Maybe we need, you know, maybe we need to train our pilots better, or we need better, you know, we need to ensure planes don't fall out of the sky, so to speak. So it's right. It's being, if you've got your metrics in place that ensure good performance, then your cost of delivery can then be worked out incrementally, and I think that's important.
Yalta's just put into the comment box that preventative versus corrective, and I think the irony of much of what I described today, I didn't find those examples. People told me those examples. The organisation knows where it is inefficient. It knows how to pull the levers. It's just that management very often have told them to pull other levers or have measured other things. So understanding your measures, understanding also whether or not your middle management leaders understand what productivity really is. I'm often struck by how many team leaders, middle managers are not really that clear on how to become more efficient or effective. They have an idea, but they don't know how to pull those levers. So I think that very often our job is helping organizations to understand what they do through the lens or eyes of their customer. So, you know, sometimes when people say, well, why do we need consultants? It's possibly to help you see through the eyes of the customer, because we're not too wedded to the process.
Yeah, exactly, and it's. I think Phil has put in the box here that productivity is not a lever. It's something you can dial up or down. It is an outcome, and I think that's exactly the message that we're getting across. It's like a football scoreboard. It's the teamwork that gets you the result. It's not the result itself. Exactly. Okay, if there's any other comments or questions to come through, we've got about a minute up our sleeve. Otherwise, those of you who wish to reach out you can either, if you know one of us directly, then feel free to call myself or Jonathan or Phil or whoever it is you know at the Coxon team. Alternatively, you can email us on remoteworking@coxonalliance.com and send it through. If you're interested in, I guess, some of those more proactive business management systems, particularly if you're in sort of either an admin or claims or some sort of area, then have a look on our website. There's a section there called, I think, Business Partners or something. There are a number of tools that we support that are very effective at that. So go and have a look at that as well. Feel free to join us we'll have another webinar most likely in a fortnight talking about another topic. Jonathan,
and just to remember, thank you very much for attending, everyone. And also, just to know that, in fact, there's an article that we are about to publish that supports this webinar, and we'll ensure you get a copy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Connie, for your kind words. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I hope it's been an informative session. Thank you, Paul.
Thank
Hope
you
to
very
see you
much,
again sometime, Paul. Stay well.
Yeah, everybody stay safe. Nice to see you. Thank you.